Is Linux Mint still beginner-friendly? 2026. Everyone keeps saying Linux Mint is best for beginners, but it's 2026. New desktop tech, new driver policies, and new packaging formats. Is Mint still the friendly gateway to Linux, or has the learning curve crept back in? Today I'll install it, test the out-of-box experience, check updates, hardware support, and give you a simple verdict for anyone thinking about switching in 2026. Quick landscape. Why 2026 matters. In the last few years, the Linux desktop has seen a heavier push toward Wayland, broader Flatpak adoption, and upstream shifts in how vendors, notably NVIDIA, handle proprietary drivers and support for older GPUs. Ubuntu's LTS cadence and kernel updates also shape what Mint can ship without breaking compatibility. Because of those changes, reevaluating Mint's beginner friendliness in 2026 is worthwhile. What used to just work can be subtly different today.
What's the 2026 Mint under the hood? Linux Mint's team has focused on a stable, long-term base through recent releases, keeping the same package base across point releases until 2026 to ensure upgrade stability. The desktop you'll most likely get is Cinnamon, with Mate and XFCE still available. And Cinnamon continues to receive conservative, usability-focused updates. Recent versions added refinements to the application menu and UI polishing, rather than radical redesigns. Those choices favor predictability for newcomers. Installation and first impressions. Plug and play? Short answer, mostly yes, with a few modern caveats. Installer flow. Mint's installer remains graphical and straightforward. Pick language, keyboard layout, disk options, create a user, and you're done. Live USB test mode still lets you try hardware before committing.
But because modern machines often use UEFI and Secure Boot, beginners should check the firmware settings if a device won't boot the USB. Mint works with Secure Boot, but some edge cases may need a quick firmware tweak. Out-of-the-box desktop. The default layout is familiar to anyone coming from Windows: a panel, menu, system tray, and simple settings app. Common controls, display, Wi-Fi, sound, Bluetooth, are easy to find and labeled. Cinnamon's recent refinements further nudge discoverability. Overall, it's still one of the most approachable desktops for absolute beginners. Initial setup wizards. Mint's first-run helpers, time zone, drivers, updates prompt, remain helpful for novices. You will likely need to accept additional driver installs on systems with proprietary GPUs. Mint makes that optional, but accessible via the driver manager.
Everyday usability. Apps, updates, and troubleshooting. Software manager. Mint ships a GUI software manager that integrates traditional APT packages and Flatpak. Flatpak is pre-installed and integrated into the software manager. That means beginners can search for popular apps and install them with a single click. Because Mint deliberately blocks Snapped by default, the team prefers Flatpak/DEB. A few apps that exist only as snaps may require extra steps to enable. Advanced users can enable Snapped manually, but for a newcomer, Flatpak plus APT covers most needs. Update Manager. Mint's Update Manager provides a clear, conservative update flow. It flags kernel or driver updates and warns when a reboot is recommended. The UI keeps things non-scary for new users. You don't need to use the terminal for daily updates. Recent Mint releases added clearer reboot prompts and help documentation for updates.
Common troubleshooting: Wi-Fi, printers, external drives. Typical consumer hardware: Intel Wi-Fi, common USB printers, webcams usually just work. The in-GUI network manager and printer settings make connecting straightforward. Problems arise with very new Wi-Fi chips or some proprietary printer drivers, but Mint's driver manager and community documentation often point you straight to a fix. For absolute newcomers, the biggest friction tends to be clubbed around non-standard hardware: some gaming laptop Wi-Fi stacks or exotic docking stations. Community forums are helpful and active. Under the hood: performance, stability, and hardware compatibility. Performance.
Cinnamon has been refined to run well on modest hardware. On modern mid-range machines, Mint is responsive. On older machines, Cinnamon is still usable, but Mate or XFCE provide lighter alternatives if resources are tight. Recent Mint point releases were deliberately conservative about resource-heavy changes to preserve this balance. Stability. Because Mint builds on an LTS base and keeps conservative defaults, it's generally stable for day-to-day usage. That stability is one of the reasons Mint is recommended for beginners. Fewer sudden breakages from rolling or experimental updates. Drivers and new hardware. Vendor moves matter. NVIDIA's evolving driver support and decisions to drop legacy branches affect older GPUs. That can create headaches for users with very old discrete cards who want the latest features.
Mint is good at offering the recommended proprietary driver via Driver Manager, but sometimes hardware-specific quirks require manual tweaks. For most typical laptops and desktops in 2026, Mint detects and configures drivers without intense intervention. The pitfalls for absolute beginners. Snap versus Flatpak. Since Mint blocks Snap by default, some newcomers may hit an app availability gap if a single program is only distributed as a snap. This is solvable, enable snapped manually, but it's a step beyond click to install. For most users, Flatpak plus APT supply everything they need. Bleeding edge hardware. Very new SoCs, weird Wi-Fi chips, or latest generation GPUs may need newer kernels or vendor driver installs that a beginner might find intimidating. Mint's conservative approach trades the absolute latest support for stability. That's good for most newcomers, but not ideal for users who want the newest experimental hardware features day one.
Verdict. Is Mint 2026 still the beginner distro? Yes, with context. Linux Mint in 2026 remains one of the best first choices for people new to Linux because it prioritizes a familiar discoverable desktop, Cinnamon, a simple graphical installer and setup, an easy software manager, Flatpak plus APT, and a conservative update strategy that minimizes surprises. Where Mint might not be ideal. If your laptop uses bleeding-edge hardware that requires the absolute newest kernel or proprietary driver updates the moment they're released, or if you rely on an app packaged only as a snap and you're unwilling to enable Snapd. In those niche cases, a distribution with newer kernels or official snap support might be a better fit. Who I recommend Mint for, and who should look elsewhere. Perfect for total newcomers, users repurposing older Windows PCs, people who want a stable desktop for browsing, office work, media, and light gaming, with driver help. Look elsewhere if you're building a machine with brand new silicon and need day one device support, or you require a particular Snap-only app and don't want to enable Snapd. Quick practical tips. Try the live USB first. Check Wi-Fi, display scaling, and touchpad behavior before installing. Use the driver manager for proprietary GPU drivers. If an app is missing, search Flatpak first. Enable Snap only if absolutely necessary. Keep the update manager active and read reboot prompts. Bottom line, in 2026, Linux Mint still earns its seat at the beginner table. It's approachable, stable, and thoughtfully conservative, meaning fewer surprises for people who just want a computer that works. If you're thinking of switching, Mint remains one of the best places to start.